People always say you can't run from your past, but on the cobbles of Weatherfield, it doesn't just catch up, it basically drags you down by the throat. Was Brody Michaelis's arrest for the murder of Theo Silverton really a shock? Or was it just the inevitable destination for a kid born into a massive lie? We're diving deep into the bombshell evidence that just turned the Theo murder mystery on its head, and honestly, those fingerprints on the phone are only the start of a much darker story. The air on Coronation Street has been thick with the feeling of a cover-up ever since Theo took that fatal fall from the scaffolding. We've watched as half the street looked like they had blood on their hands, but the law has finally swooped in, and it's not Summer Spellman they're dragging away this time. It's Brody Michaelis, the troubled teen who is now the prime target. Now, think about this for a second. This isn't just some random, wrong place, wrong time situation. Brody has spent his short life navigating a world where the people meant to protect him are either in prison or rejecting his very existence. When the police found his fingerprints on Todd Grimshaw's missing phone, the same device Theo was holding during his final confrontation, the whole narrative shifted. It went from petty thief to potential killer in a heartbeat. This feels like a calculated move by the writers to test whether we believe people can actually change, or if we're just ready to see a bad boy pay for everyone else's sins. Why did Brody even have that phone? We know the device went missing the night Theo died, and we know it eventually surfaced in a pawn shop. Brody's history tells us he's a bit of a pragmatist when it comes to crime. He steals to survive, whether it was the booze for his sisters or the cars he tried to flip with Carl Webster. He probably just saw an opportunity, maybe a dropped phone in the middle of chaos, and his survival instinct kicked in over his moral compass. Internally, Brody is a kid whose foundation was ripped out from under him when he discovered Mick Michaelis wasn't his father. That kind of betrayal creates a hollow space in a person. He's likely feeling a mix of paralyzing fear and a bitter "I told you so" towards the world. He expects the police to fail him because his own biological father, Kit Green, already did. I want to look at this arrest differently. It's not necessarily a sign of guilt, but a symptom of how invisible Brody is. He's a ghost character who hangs around the edges of the street's big plots, only noticed when something goes missing. By making him the suspect, the show is forcing us to face the fallout of his abandonment. Even if he didn't kill Theo, he's still a victim of the circumstances that led him to that pawn shop in the first place. In my opinion, arresting Brody is a lazy move by DS Lisa Swain, but it's brilliant for the drama. It's easy to pin a crime on the boy with a record who lives on the fringes. I really don't think he's capable of a cold-blooded murder. Brody is a reactor, not a planner. Remember, he's a kid who faints during high-stress situations because of his epilepsy, not someone who calculates a fatal push. Psychologically, Brody is operating from a place of defense. After being rejected by both his father figures, he's probably defaulted to a villain persona because it's safer to be feared than to be unwanted. This is a classic trauma response. If the world treats you like a criminal, you eventually stop trying to prove them wrong. His involvement with the phone is likely what we call magical thinking, believing that a quick bit of cash from a pawn shop could somehow fix his shattered life. Things are about to get a lot worse for the Michaelis legacy. While Brody sits in a cell, the real question is how this hits Kit Green. Can you imagine the torture of being the lead detective on a murder case where the main suspect is the son you publicly disowned? The tension here isn't just about the murder. It's about the collision of two men who share the same blood but zero trust. This conflict is spilling out onto the cobbles. Sally and Tim are watching their foster son being hauled away, and it makes you wonder about their whole stable home setup. If Brody is convicted, it's a failure for the Metcalfs, a failure for the police, and basically a death sentence for Brody's remaining hope. Think about the absolute despair Summer Spellman is feeling right now. She was ready to throw her life away and plead guilty to manslaughter just to make the nightmare stop. Now, there's a new name in the frame. Is she relieved, or is she horrified that another troubled life might be sacrificed to save hers? Guilt in Weatherfield is like a contagion, and it's spreading fast. This phone isn't just a piece of evidence, it's a Pandora's box. If Brody's prints are on it, he had to have come into contact with it after Theo took it from Todd. This places Brody at the scene of the crime during the most critical window. It turns the whole street into a witness pool where nobody is telling the full truth. I honestly think those Truth Teller 2 posts are going to be the key to Brody's exoneration. Even if Daniel Osborne is losing his mind over them right now, the truth is out there. The street is a pressure cooker of secrets, and Brody is just the first person to get burned by the steam. It feels targeted and unfair, doesn't it? We also have to look at the power dynamics here. Carl Webster is still lurking around, taunting Tyrone and looking for weaknesses. There's a predatory vibe on the street right now. While the police focus on the obvious choice in Brody, the real manipulators are just watching from the shadows. The stakes are climbing because Daniel Osborne is on a complete downward spiral. He's drinking himself into oblivion and neglecting Brody, which creates a chaotic backdrop for the whole investigation. When a community is this distracted, big mistakes happen. The police are under massive pressure to close the Theo Silverton case because he was an abuser, and the public wants a villain to pay for it. Brody is the perfect candidate for a rush to judgment. He doesn't have the social capital of a Barlow or a Platt. He doesn't have a lawyer father or a legacy on the street. The system is basically designed to swallow kids like Brody, and the fingerprints on the phone were the only excuse the authorities needed to stop looking for other leads. The most heartbreaking part of this is Joni and Shanice. Brody's whole motivation for his recent crimes was to keep his sisters together. Imagine the agony of knowing that by trying to save them with a quick pawn, he has effectively guaranteed they will grow up without him. He wanted to be their protector, and instead, he's become their biggest liability. This isn't just a murder story anymore. It's a story about sacrifice. Soap operas often use a marginalized character to show the hypocrisy of the main families. Brody is being sacrificed to keep the peace for the more established residents, and that's a pretty chilling thought. I suspect that the pawn shop discovery was actually a plant. Call me a conspiracy theorist, but we know how many people wanted Theo dead. Could someone have found the phone and left it where Brody, a known thief, would find it? It feels way too convenient. I think Brody is being played by a much smarter killer who knows exactly how the police, and us, perceive him. Kit Green's psychology is the most fascinating part of this mess. He's a man driven by control and status. Having his biological son arrested for murder is the ultimate threat to his life. He's likely feeling a toxic mix of shame and self-preservation. Will he suppress evidence to save his reputation, or will he throw his own son under the bus? If Brody is formally charged, we are looking at a total collapse of the Michaelis/Green family. My prediction? Kit Green will eventually find evidence that clears Brody, but he will have to choose between his career and his conscience to bring it forward. This isn't just about Brody going to jail. It's about whether Kit can ever be a father to a boy he spent months pushing away. The fallout will also hit the Metcalfes hard. Sally prides herself on her community standing, and having an accused murderer under her roof will trigger a massive crisis for her. This will likely lead to a rift between her and Tim, since Tim has always been more sympathetic to Brody's struggles. We're also going to see a transformation in Dylan Wilson. He's been Brody's sidekick and victim, but seeing Brody face life in prison might be the wake-up call Dylan needs. Or it could do the opposite. It could turn Dylan into a bitter cynic who thinks there's no point in being good. If the world treats you like bad anyway, I think the Theo story is actually the redemption of Brody story in disguise. By putting him in the ultimate danger, a murder charge, the writers are setting him up for a massive fight for his life. This is how you take a character people don't like and turn them into a hero. You make them the underdog against a corrupt system. In my view, the real killer is still walking free, and they are likely someone we least suspect. Maybe someone like George, who has been acting extremely disturbed lately. Using Brody as a shield is a classic move, and I expect the big reveal to be much more personal than a kid looking for some phone data. The long-term psychological impact on Brody will be a total loss of trust. If he survives this, he will never trust a parental figure again. He will become a lone wolf of the street, similar to a young Gary Windass or David Platt, driven by anger at the world. But wait, we haven't even talked about the impact on Daniel's storyline yet. As Daniel loses his grip, he's going to become a wild card. If he thinks Brody is the one who ruined things, his behavior could lead to a physical confrontation that puts someone's life in danger, like Ken Barlow, who we've already seen him lash out at. This arrest isn't just a plot point, it's a catalyst for the whole street to turn on itself. When a suspect is caught, people start relaxing, and that's when the real secrets slip out. The police think they have their man, but they've actually just opened a door to a dozen other crimes bubbling under the surface. There's a quiet tragedy in the way Bernie Winter is reacting to this. She finally found her grandson, only to watch him be destroyed by the system. Her protective instinct is massive, and I think we're going to see a grandma bear side of Bernie that could lead her to do something illegal to protect Brody. She's already provided false alibis for him before. What's to stop her from doing it again? Brody Michaelis is basically a mirror reflecting the failures of the adults around him. Lou, Mick, Kit, and even the Metcalfs have all played a part in the version of Brody that stands in that interrogation room. His arrest is a collective failure of a village that didn't know how to raise a child who was difficult. I strongly believe the forensics team made a mistake, or the phone evidence is noisy. Fingerprints prove contact, not intent. The fact that the police are leaping to murder from theft shows how biased the investigation has become. I agree with the fans who think this is a setup, and I think the real murderer is currently acting like a victim. The groupthink on Coronation Street is dangerous right now. Once the word murderer is attached to a name like Brody Michaelis, it's almost impossible to strip it away. Every bad thing Brody ever did, from stealing booze to bragging about the police, will now be used as proof that he was always a killer. The investigation will reach a boiling point when Todd Grimshaw himself starts to doubt Brody's guilt. I predict Todd will remember a key detail from the night of the murder that contradicts the phone evidence. This will be the moment Brody is finally seen as a human being rather than a problem child. The consequences for Brody's epilepsy will be a major subplot too. We've seen him fit behind bars before, when his meds were ignored. If he has another seizure in custody, it could lead to a medical emergency that forces the police to rethink how they treat him. This adds a layer of physical vulnerability to a character who usually tries to act so tough. Imagine the internal struggle of Summer Spellman. She's watching a kid take the fall for a crime she was ready to go to prison for. That creates a survivor's guilt that will likely drive her to her own investigation. She might be the one who actually finds the truth, creating an unlikely alliance between the perfect student and the outlaw teen. This storyline is effectively erasing Brody's past to write a new, darker future. By involving him in the Theo murder, the show is cutting off his ties to his apprentice life at the garage and his attempts to go straight. It's a tragic reversal of a redemption arc, showing how easily one mistake can undo a year of progress. My opinion is that Coronation Street is doing some of its best work with this Brody/Theo crossover. It's messy and frustrating, and it feels real. I disagree with anyone saying Brody is too young for this. Soaps have always been at their best when they show the harsh realities of youth in the justice system. The stigma of this arrest will follow Brody regardless of the verdict. In a small town like Weatherfield, you don't just get over being a murder suspect. Psychologically, he will always be looking over his shoulder. The final conflict will be a showdown between the truth and the easy answer. As Brody sits in that cell, the clock is ticking not just for his freedom, but for his sanity. He's already lost his family. If he loses his reputation as well, there will be nothing left of Brody Michaelis to save. This arrest has effectively paralyzed the search for other suspects. While the police focus on Brody, the real killer has time to dispose of evidence and align their stories. Brody is the perfect distraction, and every day he stays in custody is a day the real murderer gets away with it. There's a profound loneliness in Brody's character right now. He's in a cell, surrounded by people who think he's a monster, and the only person who might believe him is a grandmother he barely knows. That level of isolation for a teenager is devastating. It's going to leave scars that no exoneration can ever truly heal. We should view this as a coming-of-age story gone horribly wrong. Most teens have their graduation. Brody has his first murder charge. It's a subversion of the typical troubled youth narrative, moving from petty rebellion to the highest stakes possible. It forces us to ask, when does a troubled kid become a lost cause? I think the pawn shop clue was a stroke of genius from the writers. It links Brody's existing character flaws to a much bigger crime, making the evidence feel grounded in who he is. Brody's sense of fairness is completely warped. He's been treated unfairly by the system since he was in the STC, so this arrest likely feels like a confirmation of his worldview. Psychologically, he may stop fighting. If he believes the game is rigged, he might just accept the charges out of a sense of defeat. In the long run, this story will lead to a permanent departure. My final prediction is that Brody will be cleared, but the trauma will drive him to take his sisters and leave Weatherfield for good, finally escaping the cycle. He'll realize that as long as he stays on the street, he'll always be that kid the police are looking for. The Theo Silverton saga won't end with a conviction. It will end with a community that is fundamentally changed. The trust is gone, the innocent characters like Summer are tarnished, and the villains like Brody are potentially vindicated. The show is flipping the moral script, leaving everyone in a gray area where nobody is truly clean. The emotional weight of this will stay with Todd Grimshaw the longest. He was the victim of the abuse, and now he has to live with the fact that his freedom came at the cost of a young boy's life being derailed. Brody is the sacrificial lamb of the season. He's the one who has to suffer so the bigger mysteries can unravel. I believe the writers are giving Ryan Mulvey a massive opportunity here. He's gone from a minor antagonist in the STC to the center of a murder investigation, and he's handling the complexity perfectly. I hope they don't actually send him down. He's far too interesting a character to rot in a cell. So, what do you think? Is Brody Michaelis the killer we've all been waiting for? Or is he just a kid who found a phone at the worst possible time? The evidence is damning, but the psychology of the street suggests there's much more to this than fingerprints. Brody's arrest is the bombshell that just changed Coronation Street forever. Do you think Brody is being framed by the real killer, or is he actually capable of pushing Theo to his death? And what about Kit Green? Should he lose his job for disowning his own son while he's under investigation? Or is he just trying to stay professional? Let me know what you think in the comments. If you enjoyed this look into the Cobble's darkest secrets, hit that like button and subscribe to the channel for all the latest Coronation Street analysis and spoilers. We're here every week breaking down the drama, so make sure your notifications are on. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. The consequences for Brody's epilepsy will be a major subplot too. We've seen him fit behind bars before, when his meds were ignored. If he has another seizure in custody, it could lead to a medical emergency that forces the police to rethink how they treat him. This adds a layer of physical vulnerability to a character who usually tries to act so tough. Imagine the internal struggle of Summer Spellman. She's watching a kid take the fall for a crime she was ready to go to prison for. That creates a survivor's guilt that will likely drive her to her own investigation. She might be the one who actually finds the truth, creating an unlikely alliance between the perfect student and the outlaw teen. This storyline is effectively erasing Brody's past to write a new, darker future. By involving him in the Theo murder, the show is cutting off his ties to his apprentice life at the garage and his attempts to go straight. It's a tragic reversal of a redemption arc, showing how easily one mistake can undo a year of progress. My opinion is that Coronation Street is doing some of its best work with this Brody/Theo crossover. It's messy and frustrating, and it feels real. I disagree with anyone saying Brody is too young for this.